today I'm going to do my review of Salt to the Sea by Ruta Sepetys, and this might be on my favorite shelf soon. I just reorganized my Goodreads, so I have a 2016 red shelf and a 2016 favorite shelf. Then at the end of the year, I'll determine what from my favorite shelf gets put on my overall favorite shelf, which I accidentally deleted, so I had to like redo it, and it was really sad. I did read this book because of the hype, and I saw a lot of people talking about it on BookTube, and it was on the New York Times bestseller list, and so it intrigued me, so I picked it up. For some reason, I'm just really in a World War II historical fiction mood right now. I just finished The Nightingale. I can't wait to read Frontlines by Michael Grant. So there's a lot of World War II stuff going on, and I think that's because whenever I've like studied history, because I've changed school so often, we always kind of stopped at like 1900. So like my knowledge of like the 1900s, even though it's the most recent century, is probably the least out of all the things in terms of overarching world history. And then also when I was editing my Around the Year in 52 Books weeks 5 through 8 video, I noticed like how much I was talking about The Nightingale in comparison to the other books, and I really regret not doing a single review for The Nightingale, so I know I'd regret that for this book if I didn't do it, so here I am today. So this book is set in East Prussia, which is now part of Russia, in 1945 at the end of the war, and people from all over the Slavic and Baltic coast are evacuating through German Operation Hannibal, named after the Roman Spartan Carthaginian leader. Gosh, see so maybe my like ancient history is a little fuzzy too. I know more about the myths than the actual history. I'm supposed to Google so many things. And the book follows 14/young adults who are all from different countries and all have different secrets that they're bringing with them throughout this evacuation from the Allied/Russian forces. This book was a little bit difficult to get into. Like it was probably around like page 100, 115 where I actually got into a groove, because the point of view changes basically every page, and that was my main critique of the Jane Austen book club, was because it would change from past to present so quickly. But I like Game of Thrones for the other reason, is that they're in different point of views, so sometimes I would skip ahead and read all the Daenerys chapters or all the Sansa chapters, but this you have to read it in the order it is, and it changes point of view so quickly purposefully, and it was actually really masterfully done once I got used to that style and that pacing and that feel of the book. Until I got into like the pacing, I thought this was gonna be a 4-star book. I was like, I know it's gonna be really important for me to read, because stories about war and human endurance and love and family are very important. Trying to understand the human existence is why we write, so I think that's why I really resonated with this book, and why I did end up giving it a 5 out of 5 stars, and why it's on my 2016 favorites read, because this book was not what I expected, and in a good way. Like with all the hints about it and people talking about maritime history and disasters, like you know it's gonna go bad. It's war. Bad things happen in war, especially World War II. It's probably the most horrific war that our world has ever gone through, and hopefully will be the war to end all wars, even though that's really not the case with life. Anyways, I digress. So even though I don't read history as consistently as I read like fantasy, or as much as I used to when I was younger, I still really love this genre, and I really want to get back into it. But I do need to still pace it out. Like I read 2 fantasy books in between The Nightingale and Salt to the Sea because I needed that break, and I knew that for myself for my reading patterns. But I've really picked some winners lately, like The Nightingale and Salt to the Sea. Something about like war, family, historical fiction books are just tearjerkers, and I like cried during this book and I cried during The Nightingale, so I finally found the books that make me cry. So even if you typically don't read historical fiction, I think it's important to branch out and read other genres to learn from them, to figure out what you do like within those genres. Even if they're not your favorite, it's still good to read around, and especially with this story, I think it's something that everybody should read. I think that's all I really can say without spoiling anything about these characters or their secrets or their journeys to try and escape the Baltic coast. So by non-spoiler people, like the rest is gonna be spoilers, so like know about that. I mean, I know you can Google this because it's history, but reading about a historical event through a historical fiction lens is a little bit more interesting than reading like a history article or book. So, by non-spoilers. Okay, so I'm gonna go through each of the 4 characters and what I thought, and then kind of do a wrap up at the end of all my thoughts. So Joanna and Florian's point of views were my most favorite to read, because they push the story forward more than the others do, even though Alfred and Amelia's point of views are so important. But starting with Joanna, she's probably my least favorite character out of all of them, but I do appreciate her courage as a nurse in taking care of her patients and her little ragtag group, and taking care of Eva and Ingrid and looking at everyone's wounds before she looked at herself. I think she was a little bit too hard on herself of writing that letter, and that's what caused her extended family to be killed, but we don't know actually if they were killed. And then if she was in trouble for writing a letter before, why did she leave a letter at the Prussian family's house that they live in for that one night? Like, don't make sense, girl. But I definitely did cheer when she and Florian finally got together and that they take care of the young children at the end, like, oh, my like little heart could not handle, and how they take care of Claus after his Opie's gone. Okay, the shoe poet is amazing. Like, he just offers in like that little tidbit of like wonderful wisdom and things that I'll probably think about. Claus and his Opie, and when Opie just sacrifices himself for the others, that's just emotional. And then they take care of Helinka too. Okay, I'll get on to that when I talk about Amelia. Okay, so Florian, his secret, oh my gosh, that was like giving me like total like Monuments Men vibes. And I do want to read the nonfiction book. I watched the movie a year or two ago whenever it came out. Really enjoyed it, and talking about different aspects of the war. And you see that of how the plunders of war are often the art and the treasured items of a culture. Because I knew about Hitler wanting to collect a whole art museum of places that he'd conquered, but it's weird that the people from a place are inferior, but the art that they've created isn't. Ugh. I personally hadn't heard of the Amber Room, so that was really interesting to see and hear about. I don't know, it just was like really brave that he finally like accepted that he was adopted into the little family of people evacuating and working with them rather than working on his own, and realized that he can find strength through others, and that he ended up idolizing his father more than Dr. Lang or Koch or Hitler. And that was just really interesting to see how a German citizen, because he was in East Prussia, didn't agree with all of the ideals. And then finally Alfred, the pretentious creep. I didn't really like reading his point of view that much, because I did like the idea of the imagined letters that he would never write because he didn't actually care. We did care, and that's why he couldn't write them. And many of the details from his point of view helped move the story forward with letting the reader know things that the other three characters who were coming to the port didn't know, like that there weren't 10 lifeboats missing or how many people were trying to evacuate. And the story just flowed together so effortlessly. It just worked so well, and I'm still just like reeling from this whole experience. Learning that Hannelore is Jewish, and that's why he can't actually write to her, and that's why the Hitler Youth Group went after them, and that's why he can't actually be with her. That's just as astounding, and that she accepted her identity in such a critical time where she could have probably gotten away with saying, well, I deny that other half of me. She accepted who she was, which is, we don't even meet this character, and I appreciate and adore her so much. Alfred's difficult to read because he's in the typical German mindset, but we know as people studying the past that that wasn't the correct mindset, and he doesn't know that at the time because it's what he's been told. And even though he rebelled against going originally because he was weak, he went because it's what his family wanted him to do, and he found comfort through Hitler and Mein Kampf and his struggles. And I think I can't hate on him too much, because while there is the whole morality of like there's good and bad, there's also the circumstances that should not always be taken into account, but should at least be considered in remembering the craziness that was happening in Germany, and the fervor and the rage and the excitement of like the German fatherland of wanting to serve your country. And so he was doing that, just not in a good way for the world. I'm not making very much sense because I haven't quite figured out this book, because it's only been a few days since I finished it, and I haven't quite thought through everything. And I try to write it out, and I have so many, I have like 5 pages. Like, guys, like so many pages about this book because I have so many thoughts. But then when he tries to kill Amelia in atonement for loving Hannelore and saying one less of his song, that was just a crazy moment. I think I can't hate on him. I can't hate on him because he was brainwashed, but he should have known better, but he didn't. I don't know what to say about Alfred. I don't know what to say, and so I'm just gonna leave it at that, is that I have a lot of conflicted feelings about him and about Germany at that time, of people who bought into the Nazi idea, and I can't figure it out. I can't figure it out right now while I'm on pressure on camera. So then some other wrap-up things from the book. Florian mentions sometime about like halfway through the book, can history disappear if it's written in blood? And yes it can, because there's so many horrors and tragedies, and even little tragedies of one person dying, that we don't know because not everything's remembered. And even this, 25,000 people died in the Baltic Sea throughout the war, which we don't know about because the Germans did try to cover up a lot of what they did. When the Allied forces finally invaded Germany and they were going to all of the different concentration camps, a lot of the Germans killed the prisoners and then themselves to hide what they'd done so there wouldn't be any victims or survivors to talk about the horrors and the tortures of war. And it's just still so crazy that we talk so much about the Titanic, where I think a couple thousand people died, where there was 10,000 people on this ship and they died and no one knows about it until this book. I'm sure historians who study that time period know that, but overall it's not in history books. It's not been made into a movie. Oh my gosh, if this was a movie, that'd be phenom. That'd be so phenom. I really liked the themes that correlated from the beginning of the book to the end of fate with Florian, of was he fated to be found out or fated to follow in his father or his mentor's footsteps. There was the guilt of Joanna of being a murderer for her cousin and for her family that she left behind, her brothers and her father. And then there was the shame of Amelia by being assaulted by Russians and for being Polish and for being ashamed of her heritage because that's what the world was telling her to feel. And then the fear of Alfred of not being able to be strong enough for a strong enough Nazi or strong enough soldier or sailor, and how they kind of like, they open the book but then they also talk about it again as the climax of the Wilhelm Gustloff going down. That was a really cool tie-in. I really enjoyed that. Creepy parts when Amelia has her reoccurring song of little duckies, their heads in the water that she sings because her mom used to sing to her, and there's just children floating with their heads down, which doesn't make sense if they were wearing life jackets and their heads are floating down in the water with their feet up like they're little duckies. That metaphor analogy was very deep and that was kind of horrifying. I could feel the cold and the terror of the sea at that point. I think this is a book that I'll think on in the future, especially when I'm reading more about World War II. I think the most astounding part of this book was Ruta Sepetys' research of trekking through Poland and East Russia and Germany and understanding the point of view and all the people she talked to. When you're writing historical fiction, there's a lot to research, and she went and was so considerate of everyone's stories and ideas and pasts and experiences to be able to find those like first person or second person accounts and memoirs of the story. That just was astounding, and that's why I'll always like appreciate history and historians and historical fiction, because they do so much tying in together more than I could ever even imagine to put this story together. And so it's just phenomenal. I can't stop thinking about this book. I mean, it's only been a few days. So if you've read this book, I'd love to hear what you had to think about it. This has been Bookies and Cookies. My name's Laura. I post videos on Sundays, Saturdays with book reviews on Thursdays, and I love each and every one of you. I hope you never forget it, and remember to learn from the past. Thanks guys. Gotta talk about this because there's just so many emotions. I'll move to other like epic epochs. Yeah, I'll move to like other eras and epochs later, but right now I'm like really in a World War II mood. Even though Amelia and Albert's stories are so important. Alfred, not Albert.